What's up, everyone? Coach Rob here. We're waiting for our good friend Taryn to hop on today. Today we've got a fun talk. It's a FLO talk. I'm chilling out in the park because it's Sunday afternoon. Give me one moment here. Get this thing set. Who do we have hopping on? All right. I see Bella on there. What's up, Bella? Live with Blue. Vice Lee. Here we go. All right, everyone. What's happening? How we doing out there? Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
There we go. Yep, I'm good. I've got my volume back on. All right. It's I had to take advantage of the day. It's this amazing Sunday afternoon here in Eugene, and if you know what that's like, you take advantage when you can. I've got Allie and Skyla out here, so family in the park. This is the way we quarantine in nature, build the immunity, and take it in this way. Of course, keep the distance, have respect, and reside in the middle somewhere. To me, the middle is respect. Honor other people's feelings, and sometimes I have to watch myself. I will say some things that I'm firm in my stance, but I'm firm in my stance on the middle road. If you're right, you're left, you're extreme, too far on the other side, I'm gonna, that's where I'm gonna go a little sideways. But the mask thing and some of this stuff, my stance is this. Like, again, I made a comment today on Facebook, and it goes right in line with where I'm at with all of it. And I'm just as guilty as anybody else. Anytime I put something in my mouth and I know that it's not contributing to me in a healthy or positive way to fight the battle that we're going through, when you're making those decisions, yet and you're, tearing down your health and your immune system and these things, yet you go on Facebook and you bash somebody for not wearing a mask out in the park. To me, I align in the middle on a lot of these pieces, and that's where I want to kind of start with today, which is, listen, take care of your health and your immune system first. The real pandemic is lack of healthy nutrition and wellness, and really fitness. In the medical industry, there's a health continuum of sickness and wellness. And all that means is sickness, you're over here and you have, you're on medications for whatever illness, whereas wellness, it just means that you're within that range of blood pressure, cholesterol, A1C count for your insulin levels, which ultimately lead to the major trifecta of, heart disease, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and type 2 diabetes. And that type of health environment is ultimately going to put you in the risk. And the reality is our society as a whole is unfit, unhealthy to fight the war against this disease. The reality is the people that are high risk are the ones, and of course you have genetic hereditary issues that you can't help. And those people are high risk for sure. I have a younger brother. It's a type 1 diabetic, respect the hell out of his position with where he's at. He inherited that piece. Self-induced, my stance is a little different. I self-induce on myself. I'm not perfect. None of us are. But the key is keeping the balance in it all, balance in your own ways, and balance in, I think, how you treat others in this whole pandemic. I'm seeing people that are like, screw the mask, and I'm going to breathe on and cough on you if I want to. And I'm going to just say it's allergies, and, screw the world, and everything's meme city. And then you've got the other side that is, if you're, out in a park, we've got to shut down the parks. I mean, again, the fact that we're just now reopening parks is crazy to me. Yet the Walmart thing, and in my opinion, of course, I operate in health and fitness, and that's the real issue to begin with. So in my mind, essential business is fitness with appropriate distance, right? So anyway, there's my rant opening. Coach Rob, now we'll do the formal introductions. That's how I like to roll. So listen, today, everyone that's hopped on, really appreciate you joining in today. Have somebody I dearly respect and appreciate, number one, as a friend and businessman and community contributor. I first met him, interestingly enough, through one of my essential emotional addictions, or I won't say addiction, medication is how I look at it. It's treatment for my sanity, and that's tattoo work. It is what it is. It's how I take pleasure and I get a release. And Taryn's seen that side with me. It's I go into deep breath work half of the time, and I'm humming and chanting and my tattoos are ceremonial in the sense that they represent whatever emotion I'm going in at that time, and it's rarely number 32 off the wall or whatever that is. So being able to connect with this guy over the last whatever period of time, I don't know how many hours we've spent together, but it's a lot, as you can see. But through this time, I've really gotten to know Taryn and really learned a lot from him through esoterics and astrology and some of the agnostic ways. And through the last year, he's climbed his way up, or not through the last year, through the last few years in Masonry. And I'll let him give his full title and everything here, but Grand Poobah of the Freemasons here in Eugene. And welcome, and stage is yours, man.
Thanks. Official title, I'm the Worshipful Master of Eugene Lodge number 11 for 2020, and we'll see how about 2021. There's several Masonic lodges, so I'm only master of one, and that's relatively unrelated to my studies well, it's not unrelated to my studies in astrology. Freemasonry is what brought me to astrology and the study of everything esoteric, which I feel is the two things can join, but that's not a statement of Freemasonry as a whole. However, that's beside the point. So I think the point of the talk today, and I really liked the way you started, because that is exactly where I was trying to go with this, is the middle way. Right now, we're in a, needless to say, a place of confusion. And people oftentimes are over here, like you said, or they're over here. And, I think there's unhealthy aspects, obviously, to either one of those. And so the way that I have navigated this confusing time is through my understanding of astrology. Because, one thing that is really prevalent right now, which is also seen in the astrology, if you know how to read it, is this sense of, ulterior motive. There's all these strange things people are saying in regards to why we're experiencing this right now. And, that is relied upon, your belief or faith in a certain leader or a certain person on TV or on the internet who is telling you something. And you will never really be able to know how much truth there is in that. But my perspective is that one thing that we have known since the beginning of time, or at least as far as we have recorded it, is that the skies do not lie. They move in apparent motions. There are many different types of astrology, but nearly all of them, with some small divergences, work based on the same principles. And so this is a place that I look and that I want to give some insight on, because the heavens have no agenda other than nature. There is no money or power to be gained by what they do. It is just, the revolution of time, karma, what have you. I mean, these things are beyond human agenda. So without repeating myself too much, I guess I will just kind of get into it.
Well, let me just say one thing, and this kind of what brought it up. I should have really stated this in the opening. It was probably I think well, we're in June, so about 9 months ago. It was back in like October or November when you first talked to me about what was coming up, and you had read my tarot and talked about some different things. And then at that same time, you had talked about, you know what, coming up in 2020 is a new change of a cycle. We're entering, I think you said, the Bronze Era. Is that right? No.
No, I'll touch
Sorry.
on that. We are, the end of this year is the end slash beginning of a 200-year cycle,
There you go.
which we have been using astrologers have been tracking this. It's a regular timing technique that they've been using it for probably at least 1,000 years, quite a ways back. But I don't want to diverge you too much. We'll touch on
But
that.
you know, I thought it was again, that's really what built this up. You know, I heard you say it about 9 months ago. You said it to me again about 6 months ago, and then like right before everything blew up, it was like, oh my gosh, like everything that you had talked to me about over the last year was starting to transpire and happen and take off, and a lot of the ways that you kind of mentioned it would, or you know. Like you said, in that way of not describing but being in the middle, you know. So
Sure.
anyway, yeah.
Well, you know, just a side note is there's so many people who I encounter in my regular life. You know, if you know me, you know that I love to share the things that I'm learning about, and especially astrology. And I would think that with me having expressed that to so many people, and then given the state that the world is in right now, maybe some of the people that thought I was just rambling on probably feel a little differently now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll get right into it. The astrology community has been aware of this. They've been waiting for it to happen. It's really pretty eerie. You know, if you go, there's a lot of videos on YouTube that you can find from like a year ago, 2 years ago, where they're talking about what they predict to happen in 2020. And then you look at where we're at now, and it's pretty chilling. It is interesting that nobody that I heard of, I think there was one person who said something about a potential pandemic. But other than that, a lot of people didn't really mention too much about the pandemic. It was more around the theme of financial collapse of sorts, and a change in the world structure and world government, which you know, as we hopefully will get into, these things all kind of go together. But so 2020, the first and foremost reason why this was standing out as being a difficult year is because, not that there's anything wrong with Capricorns, and there's not, but certain planets rule certain signs, and Saturn rules Capricorn. So when a planet is in a sign that it rules, in a sense, it has more ability to do the things that are of its nature. And Saturn, no planet or sign is inherently bad, but that is you know, relative to the individual. And so what things that Saturn represents is confinement, you know, limits, rules, big government, rigidity, you know, lesson teaching, you know, in one of its better aspects. And so when you've got Saturn in Capricorn, which it's been in for quite a while, you know, there's an emphasis on that. And the issue comes, and this is what I'm going to kind of get into here, is what else is there with it. So starting right on January, we had what was called a conjunction. Now, a conjunction is where two planets essentially are aligned. You know, we always hear this term planetary alignment, and very seldomly, except for the case of a conjunction, are they actually aligned. But that's what happens when we have a conjunction. So right at the beginning of January, we had Pluto and Saturn right in an alignment, a conjunction, as well as the south node of the moon, which is another thing that is what we would consider malefic, so that's not great. And then you know, shortly thereafter, we had Mars. There was just a lot of stuff all bunched up together in Capricorn. And I mean, right as soon as it became 2020, we started seeing stuff jumping off, which is, it's kind of funny because the issues that first happened seem, you know, pale in comparison to this. And, you know, if we remember back where everybody was, there was talk of World War III, and there was, you know, this killing of some guy overseas. I don't follow that stuff, so I can't really speak, you know, the statements of it. And then off to the side, some people, I remember my coworkers who follow the news more were telling me, oh, well, you know, there's some flu in China or something like that. And it really just got kind of brushed off. But as we see now, that was, you know, highly relevant. So now, again, to get back into the major point of the overview, is what we're looking at here is in astrology, there are what's called the outer planets. And these are the ones that are farthest away and they move the slowest. This would be Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto. All of these planets are considered generational because they will tend to, well, Saturn and Jupiter will move, you know, they move a little quicker. They take about 3 years to move through a sign. And then when we get to the outer ones, they will take an entire generation of lives to move from one sign to another. And so when these outer planets are doing stuff, it tends to cause big changes in the world. And that's what we're dealing with here in 2020 is a lot of activity between those outer planets, an unusually large amount. And in the past, when we've seen this type of activity or these type of alignments, you know, we see notable occurrences, namely with Saturn-Pluto. So when we've had Saturn-Pluto activity, particularly conjunctions, let me check my notes here. The World War I, when that started, that was during a Saturn-Pluto conjunction. Yesterday, kind of what incited this whole idea to do this talk was when, you know, I had mentioned that we're dealing with a lot of same things that we had with a lot of other pandemics. So the Spanish flu is probably the worst one that we've seen in our recent history. That was most people, I would say it's pretty agreeable that that was a direct result of World War I. That came from the amount of dead bodies that were rotting and the soldiers that were in contact with them. And it was spread through soldiers moving around. And regardless, we know, you know, if you know anything about history, you know, that was a really, really terrible pandemic, the last big pandemic that we dealt with. That was a result of a Saturn and Pluto conjunction. The Cold War, that was another one that occurred during conjunction of the two. In the early 80s, we had another one. And this is when we had the AIDS epidemic. We had, to jump backwards, when polio was on the scene, that was during another one. And then as 9/11 as well. Now, there's a lot of other planetary factors that go into the nature of these occurrences, but the one thing that they have in common with where we're at right now is this Saturn-Pluto conjunction. That to me, you know, that can be a daunting thing, but on the other side of that coin, what it tells me is that the planets are always moving. And so we are dealing with this, yes, but they're going to move, and it's going to things are not always going to be this way. In fact, right now, from March 21st, we are in the midst of, Saturn actually moved out of Capricorn, which it doesn't always do. It doesn't always move out of its sign for that allotted period of time. So it's moved away from Pluto. And if you'll notice from the 21st, that would, I don't watch the numbers, but you know, I know right around then we were getting pretty high in the numbers. And since that point, if you'll recollect and look at where we're at now, things have started to ramp down a bit. And there is this notion that, you know, things are getting calmer or getting better. And that's great. However, Saturn is going to move back into Capricorn fairly soon on June 1st. It's going to retrograde back into Capricorn, where it will be again with Pluto. And so that's the thing I think is important. Is I understand that everybody has struggled to deal with the confinement of the quarantine and is just ready to get out. Everybody's ready to get back to work. You know, it's really tense times. I've experienced it. A lot of people have. But on one hand, while I don't want people to think, oh my God, this is going to go on forever, what, you know, the world is coming to an end, because it's not. This also is not over. There is a lot more going on this year. 2020 has a few breaks, but it is a really, really bumpy ride. And we're in a break right now. So, you know, when the sun's out like it is now and we're sitting in the park, that's okay to enjoy. But I would caution people who are having the mind state that we're moving away and that was rough, you know, but good thing it's over with, you know, because unfortunately the summer after June and towards the end of June, we get a lot more rocky stuff.
Yeah.
And we'll have another break probably at the end of the summer. And then the last part of the year, again, especially, and I am not a person who follows politics, but it is pretty notable that right around the election time, there is some really heavy duty stuff going on. Mm-hmm. So what does this all mean is that we are witnessing a global change. That's obvious. But those things are never easy in the midst of them. Change is never easy. Nobody likes change, but it's necessary. And I think that, you know, again, this would depend on the perspective of the individual, but a lot of these terrible things that, you know, that I just listed off, you know, I can't say that all of them have good results, but we're also not far enough removed from a lot of these things to really see what the big picture is. And that's another important thing to remember. A lot of people will be skeptical of astrology because, you know, you might say, well, here's a date. You know, for instance, if you were to jump back prior to this being, to Corona being as prevalent as it is, and someone would say, oh, well, you know, July 1st is the Saturn-Pluto conjunction. Nothing happened. That's not the way that it works. This is not, astrology is not built for the media and for social networking. It happens, and it will happen by oftentimes in the beginning very small occurrences that grow and span over long, long periods of time. One example, this is not a small occurrence, but you look at 9/11. You know, thousands of people died in an instant. Mm-hmm. That was terrible, but that brought upon the current, you know, state that we're in with Iraq and that whole thing, and how many people have died in the pursuit of whatever that's about. You know what I mean? The war. You know, that instance what just heralded this whole other thing that, you know, has just spanned for such a long time. And so it's really, we're lucky if we get any apparent view of what is going on, but it is obvious nonetheless that we are in the midst of a big change, and it's not an end, it's just a change. And the best thing that we can do to navigate through this is to, you know, have some form of reliable insight, which again, I think astrology is probably the only thing that we can really trust at this point, even though unfortunately a lot of people don't understand it to the point where they can just pick something up and look at it.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of videos on YouTube. There's a podcast simply called the Astrology Podcast. They also, all of their videos are on YouTube. And I don't know if you watched the one yesterday. It can be over your head because there's a lot of terms that are used that are unfamiliar to people who haven't studied astrology. But at the same time, if you're willing to sit down and listen to it, they still speak in a way that anybody could understand. And so again, if somebody is looking for a source of insight on this and what's to come in the future, I recommend astrology because, again, it's it's unbiased, you know, it has no agenda. So another thing I want to, again, sorry to jump back, but another notable thing about this year is that we had Mercury was retrograde in from February 17th to March 10th, and Neptune nonetheless. So what that means is, you know, when Mercury is retrograde, Mercury deals or represents communication and information. So when it's retrograde, that becomes skewed, right? You know, that represents confusion. And Neptune is the outer planet that also represents delusion, fantasy, you know, for better or worse. And if you remember, right around that time, that's when everybody was panic buying, and we didn't know what was, you know, it was so much confusion and misinformation too. You know, is it airborne? Does it affect young people? You know, and so that's another example where you can look at where the astrology was earlier this year and how that was playing out for everybody. And again, another leap back. I'm terrible at staying with an agenda, but I should note that the concept behind astrology is that we have these bodies that are within a proximity of us that have some amount of influence on us here on Earth. And so to make this a little bit seem less far out, the sun is the biggest body that we are near, and we obviously know the effect that it has on the earth, on our moods, on a lot of different things, as well as the moon, which is the closest to us. We know that that affects tides and everything like that. So if science has proved that these other two, you know, planetary bodies that are within our, you know, our solar system affect us, then why would the other ones that are out there not? So that's essentially what we're dealing with, is that the nature of these different planetary bodies and their position to each other and to us is what causes these things to occur. Yeah.
Well, I think it's, you know, again, if you just going back through the whole time history, you know, you sent me the graph. I think it was you that sent it to me, showed, you know, parallels with, you know, the influenza breakout, and showing that second wave being the large one, and the third one, you know, really second in charge. So the first initial spike was not the big hammer. That was just a peppering, and then it exploded, and then, you know, still had another kind of a wave on the way down. And you know, I feel that I can sense that coming on already, you know, because of some of the situations that I'm seeing. You know, there's no doubt that this thing is contagious, number one. Number two is it's harmful to those with weakened immune systems and respiratory systems, and it's going to attack the respiratory if, you know, you have challenges there. And you know, there's, as you mentioned, a healthy balance in phasing out of this. And you know, I see a lot of the aggressive attacks on the governors, and you know, as a business operator, I'm in the middle of all of this, and I, again, back to that, the middle stance, try to surf it, you know, try to ride the wave of balancing what's right and what's not. And you know, I've worked in plenty of infrastructure in my life, from military through, you know, collegiate athletics, and rigid places in my life where I've had coaches and leadership and structure that I've had to operate within, and that's how it goes. And I respect the framework of what we have, and I try to be respectful, but do my thing in between there, and stay safe and healthy. And I think if we come back too fast, I mean, I'm seeing mass gatherings and pretty crazy stuff. You know, I think, you know, the way we approached this, we had to take the safe measures and do what we have done. The data has shown us different things, not good, not bad, kind of in between, again, in the middle. And you know, now it's really in a position, some of my personal opinion really falls in that position that's, you know, what should we do? Of course, I'm not the sociologist in, bio, virus attacks. But what I can say is that I think the ultimate effect on locking down the healthy public versus the unhealthy public is going to have a much greater result in long-term damage, mental health and economical health. That's ultimately going to come from the collapse of, people's livelihoods and such, seeing the unemployment rate skyrocket to where it's at. And that's going to continue to break our overall system even more. So it's a challenging time, nonetheless.
Well, so here's something to consider, and this is an unfortunate truth. If we're going to go ahead and go with the concept that there's validity to all this, if we're approaching another adverse, alignment, with Saturn coming back to Capricorn and it's not going to be conjunct again with Pluto, but it's going to get real close. We can't stop that, right? We can't, even if we were to tell everybody, look, like there's something else bad coming, like chill out, don't go out and, then it's going to be an issue of people's mental health. And then it's going to be an issue of people's money and all of the other things that come from people staying in. Or vice versa, if we say, look, go out there, make money, get back to your daily life, don't let this affect you, then we're probably going to see a spike in the numbers. So there is a certain amount of, again, with the astrology where, it forces you to kind of accept that you don't have a whole lot of control over this. The world and these changes are going to occur in probably a predetermined, fashion, but even if not, if there is some amount of human factor in the decisions made there, then it's going to be one or another. But we're going to go through a time of adversity again, and then that's going to lighten up, and we'll, So yeah. That's where, again, you really only have to make your very best decisions in what you think is right. In Freemasonry, prudence is we have our four virtues. Temperance, fortitude, prudence, and justice, which is something that's done me a lot of good in my decision making with all this. But prudence, right? Prudence is caution. I mean, hey, trust me, I have not liked this any more than anybody else because it happened so fast. It's hard for anybody. But I'm eager to get out there and to see people and everything like that. But just be cool about it. You know what I mean? I've seen too, especially on social media, man, when the 15th came around, people were out there just like it was just, like it never even happened. And, that's fine. I like seeing people happy. I love to see a smile on everybody's faces, but, maybe just kind of reel it in a little bit, or like if you need to just get out there and do it, but don't continue to carry on. Yeah. Like, this never happened, because it's not over, and it's probably going to be, just from an astrological standpoint, it's probably not going to be to a place of control, or we're not going to get back to anything close to what we consider normal this year. It's going to be next year. Yeah. And just to make a quick point, I guess I'll just kind of jump into the lighter note, since I just was a little bit heavy with that. Some things to consider, again, where astrology is helpful in all this, is that, we are in the midst of one of the most tumultuous years that we have seen in recent history. Some of the older generation probably would argue that, but, for us people, your and me age, my age, this is like something we've never experienced. However, the astrology of 2021, I don't want to say it's unusually good, maybe just in contrast, but it's not what this year is. Yeah. And so when I look at that, what I see is that we are going through a place of darkness and change, which that's Pluto. Pluto is the farthest planet out. It is the one that we know the least about. We don't even know if it's a planet, but that's what that represents is transformation and the underworld, and in a lot of the old mythology, everybody had to travel through the underworld, to be reborn again. And so that's what we're dealing with here. And I forgot what I think that might have been the point, just not to fret too much, because,
Yeah,
you know,
there's a
there's
slingshot.
the sun always rises again. You know what I mean? Everyone's heard
Yeah.
that analogy, but that's a testament to the cyclical motion of stuff. So we're going to come out of this. And so the 200-year thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
What that is again, we're talking about the conjunctions, right? So when Saturn and Jupiter, which are the two planets which we can visibly see, when they have all of the conjunctions that they have been making, which happens, I want to say every 30 years or so, they will consistently be in a certain element of sign. So for the last 200 years, all of the Saturn and Jupiter conjunctions have occurred in Earth signs.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of that, I'm trying to think of, I can't remember. I wish I should have wrote that down, you know, but we see stuff, you know, things that are of earthy nature are the big themes there, right?
So, you know, just to touch on that, of course, some of my studies are in Ayurvedic medicine and health. And, you know, in the Ayurvedic world, we focus on the five elements, hence the Element 5 Academy. And oftentimes people don't even know what it is. And I get a little deep, so I try to hold back on some of that stuff. But, you know, the five elements are earth, water, fire, wind or air, and space or ether. And, you know, personality types will fall in between. You have a certain kind of category where we break apart and these elements are combined. And, you know, when earth and water are combined, it's known as kapha. And when water and fire are combined, it's known as pitta. And wind and space or ether are combined, it's known as vata. And if you think of the seasons, if you think of like October through February, March, like winter, okay, is kapha. And wherever your birth date falls within these categories, a lot like your sign. And if you fall within these areas, and also you'll have certain personality characteristics that will come out very similar to the astrological signs. Kapha is very slow moving, but you know, if winter, it's wet, it's cold, it's damp. But then, you know, you start to get into the early spring where there's a lot of change. It's the point of the season where there's the most change. Things are blossoming and allergies kick in and all of these things. So it's really interesting that this virus breakout really busted out at the very tail end of kind of transition, not tail end, like right on the transition of kapha into pitta. And pitta is oily. When you combine fire and water, you get the oil, and pitta is that intense type A, alpha, dominance. It's directional, it's intentional, it's all of that stuff. And we're in the direct transition of pitta right now, and it's oily, it's fire, and it's sticking. And you're seeing it in some of the breakouts with, you know, protesting and some of the intensity that's picking up. And that's what really worries me, watching, you know, knowing that we're also, you know, kind of lean into the next piece of vata. But you know, we've got to really, you know, you talk about the break, there's going to be the break because it's going to warm up and all of that good stuff. But as kind of like, you know, if you study the breakout of wildfires and the season that it hits, and what's interesting is people go, well, why do wildfires catch a second wind in like September, October, November, when it's really the temperature drops? Well, the reason why is because we enter that season of vata, of fall, where things dry up and then the wind starts picking up. And so it's that, again, on that transitional period of this hot, oily fire tail end, where in the beginning it's good, but then as we ramp up and we come down, it gets really aggressive into the transition. And when that vata season comes around in September this year, that's when I see a lot of craziness in my world of Ayurvedic studies. The wind is gonna take it off. There's gonna be a nasty spike in transition, and then it, at the tail end of the year we come back into Kapha, and when that water comes around, it's gonna cool this season. And so in the same sense of all the astrological alignment, this all flows with it because it's all connected. Ayurvedic studies are 3,000 plus years old.
Heavily I would say the Vedic astrologers are some of the most advanced in the Persians.
Mm-hmm.
But to speak to that, Mars is going to be in Aries. It's going to go through Pisces pretty soon here, and then it's going to be in Aries for a really long time, for an unusually large or long amount of time in comparison to how long it usually stays. So again, when we're talking about planets being in their home sign, Mars rules Aries. And so if you can think, Mars rules Scorpio and Aries. And the way that I describe this is that when Mars is in Scorpio, so Mars is action, it's drive, it's power, but Scorpio is a water sign and it's very deep and hidden. So, you think of a soldier, right? You got a soldier who's, the one that's covered in mud and he's crawling through, but he's got a sniper rifle, and he'll get you, and he's very focused, and the nature of Mars is to disintegrate, to take away. Well, when you got Mars in Aries, that's like, if you ever seen, I don't know, I always picture Braveheart, or if you ever seen Alexander, where they're riding on the horse, straight at it, but you got two groups of thousands of people running directly full, at each other. That's Mars and Aries, and that's what we're going to have probably about a month or two from now. We're going to have that from then till the end of the year to go along with all of the rest of this. So there, you're clearly, there is a connection there, because if that's a prediction you made based on that study, that goes along with the astrology. But just before we get too far away, I want to jump back to the 200-year thing. So they're moving, the conjunctions are moving from earth signs into air signs. That could be looked at as ironic, considering that, we've got an airborne, virus spreading, but we haven't really, well, there's debate, there's different systems. Some would say that we already have moved into that alignment, but all of the different systems are agreed that in December 20-something of 2020, that transition will have been made. So we know for a fact in December that we will have those conjunctions will have moved into air signs. Now, what air represents in terms of astrology is intellect, it is technology, information again, and so for better or worse, and this depends on your particular perspective, we're probably going to be seeing for the rest of our days here some, because you think technology is already crazy, but that's the biggest insinuation of that switch into air signs is huge leaps in technology. AI is one of the things that, see you later, Jay. I'll talk to you about the asteroid thing later. So that's something to consider. And everything is a double-edged sword, because, okay, so if we're moving into this area where technology is going to boom even more than it already is, some people are scared for their jobs. I've heard that they're going to make it to where semi-trucks can drive themselves, and all them truckers are going to be out of work and stuff. That's not good. But also, if we're in the place where, we're dealing with this new virus that's taking people out, and we don't know what to do about it, an advance in technology could be something to harness that, or to protect us from future, to deal with these things better in the future. Because, I was researching the Spanish flu the other day, and that was terrible. In comparison, number-wise, and just, and you look at some of the astrological things were so similar, and you ask yourself, well, why are we, for one thing, this is still really early, so there's that. But two, why was that so gruesome? Well, it was in 1918. They didn't have the ability to share information as quickly as we do, and the medical technology and stuff like that. So in that aspect, that what we're dealing with now, if we're moving into a place where technology is going to be advancing even more, then, probably is going to have some good things associated with it.
Yeah, you know, it's, I mean, you can see it already with, you know, and again, same thing in, you know, the Vedic side, which is, you know, the Vata is, um, you know, light, airy, you know, moving like the breeze and the wind, and that's information moving. If you think of the internet and, you know, social technology, you know, integration into our lives and automation of, hate to say it, this word, but employment and, you know, certain skills. And, you know, the interesting part about, you know, the setup of battery alert there,
Uh-oh.
you know, again, the interesting part about this is that, uh, you know, we have to have a distance, which puts us into a mandatory technological interaction and engagement on so many levels with where our society has, you know, framed ourselves in within the confines of, you know, convenience and operational, you know, support of our world and how we live in the internet and technology. And you know, right now we're airing live on, you know, Instagram, which, you know, again, back to moving information, you know, good and bad, somewhere in the middle, uh, you know, and more information isn't a better thing, you know, that will actually overload us even more, you know. So, you know, I think, you know, for me right now, I try to find my credible sources of information that I respect and not, you know, again, that's in the middle, that takes a stance at looking at all of those things and try to stay off mainstream, you know, media and news. And it's always kind of been in my nature. So I know you're similar in that way. Hence, I think why we've, you know, dug into some of these other studies in our lives and start to find our own kind of signals in all of this. And, um, you know, my thing right now is respect and awareness, conscious awareness and respect for, you know, other people's opinions and ideas and space and, you know, spatial awareness when you're out there. You know, I naturally have this as it is from some of my history and upbringing and some of my earlier years in training and life. And, you know, I kind of look for the exits and watch study who's in the room. And it's a part of, you know, my lifestyle and my outlook on things, which is, again, awareness. And not necessarily because I'm afraid of something crazy that's going to happen, but I just want to be in tune with my environment and what's happening as much as I possibly can. And, you know, and I definitely believe in intuition. And, you know, I think seeking some of these things out, I had my tarot read when I was really young, and it just really put, whether if it gave me a focus in my life, that gave me a path, and it's, help me develop intuition with where I'm at by studying these pieces. So if you're on today, you know, and today was a little bit left field for you, again, find something in the middle here, right? Maybe have your own stuff read and or not, but
Yeah, and you know, if your battery's going low, I probably better make my closing
yep.
statements. The thing that I try to do with any situation, and with this especially, is, you know, I get a lot of joy out of thinking about what kind of positive things are happening behind the scenes or that have happened in the past. Isaac Newton developed some of his most groundbreaking theories. He was in school, in college, and the Black Plague broke out, and they had to cancel school, like they have now. And it was that time alone, and it being broke away from the normal curriculum, where he developed some of the things that have changed our life now. Things like that. Another point that I think about is with school. You know, that's a big thing to think about. I have a kid. You know, our daughters are the same age. What is, you know, it's so hard to fathom, how are we going to get back to a place where they can have that many kids in a school again? And, you know, there's going to have to be a lot of reassessing of the way things have been done. And I think that the public school system, is one of the things that a lot of people have been displeased with more and more as time has went on. And so maybe, you know, this is tough right now, but maybe rethinking and restructuring could be a good thing. all the way down to the bare bones fact of, you know, it's things like this that, you know, if you've ever seen something terrible happen, you know, it makes you turn around and look at the people that you love and your friends in a completely different light. You know, we take so much for granted, our freedom, you know, what we have access to on a regular basis, and we need things like this to kick us back into gear and to, like, you know, shake us a little bit and be like, look, man, like, life is a gift. Your family is a gift. Your freedom is a gift. Your job is a gift. You know what I mean? Like, there's so much, especially as Americans, that we are just privileged to have, and we take it for granted. And so I know a lot of people know this, man, but, you know, it's just like, I swear a nice day has never been nicer than it has been over the, you know, these times, you know, and that's a
Yeah.
beautiful thing, you know. And so it's tough going through these things, but just remember that it's never for nothing. No adversity is never for no reason. If you don't pick up on it and you don't derive the value out of it, then that's too bad. But you need to always be looking for it because it's always there. So like I said, just remember, we're going through a tough one, but it's going to be better next year. I'm not saying it's going to be great because these things take time, but it's going to be better. You know, enjoy this break we're in because we got some more rough seas ahead. But just, you know, theoretically, two more real quick points.
Yeah, please.
Technically, in terms of the astrology of the year, right around March was what's regarded to probably be the worst, right? I'd say it's arguable that we have been through probably, if not the worst, one of the worst points this year, and most of us are still here. You know what I mean? We made it. So if we can make it through, you know, and this is again where martial arts and exercise and all those things, when you know you can push yourself so far, and you know you can do it, then when you go get back in there and do it again, then your mind knows you can do it. So we've already been through one of the worst, if not the worst, parts of the year, and we did it. So when it comes up again 2 or 3 more times this year, just remember that we can do it. Two, you know, Pluto, it's you know, I don't think of it as a bad thing, but it's what's causing a lot of really big monumental change. It moves slower or faster through different positions it's in, and right now we're in one of the shorter ones for it, so that's kind of a good thing. Um, yeah, and so I don't know. Just I think that's probably what I said is that, you know, we know, just for the information of everybody, we've made it through one of the spikes. There's going to be more, but use your best decision making. Use do everything. Look at every situation for this side, and take whatever's in between that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, bittersweet, yin and yang, you know, balance, light and dark, and all the forces, and you know, find strength in the middle, and you know,
And find the light in the darkness, man.
that's it.
That's,
You
you
know,
know, it's always there. The brightest light is in the darkest of places, and all you gotta do is open your eyes. You know, it's right there. You know, it's
yeah,
see your
yeah,
kids, you see your family. You know,
yeah. You know, it's I've definitely felt that side personally as well. You know, more family engagement and some of these things, and you know, I've said this throughout the last couple months, but you know, they classified us as socially distanced, but really it's physical distancing, not social, because social is done now through technology so much. You know, it is what it is, and you know, I have family across the country, and through this, you know, the Zoom things become more of a norm, and you know, and I'll tell you, getting online even for us, for me, I've dabbled with social media, but it's never been where I like to live. It's you know, part of the business and things that happen, but you know, through this, we went online right away with all of our workouts and trying to support our communities with what we could, and you know, it really put us into this light of, hey, you know what, take the step. Don't have so much fear in putting yourself out there, and standing your strength, you know, through this. And you know, I'll close up with my piece of health and nutrition and what E5 Academy is all about. You know, again, and sometimes I have to watch my mouth because I'll make, you know, sarcastic kind of jokes about masking cars or whatever it is, and and I'm less than sensitive, and I come back around and I'm like, I shouldn't have said that. What I really meant was this, and so I think thinking before we speak and thinking before we react, I'm just as guilty as anybody else at times. You know, like you said, stand in the middle and do what you can for it. One of my little rants is this: like, none of us will ever be perfect in any way, shape, or form of whatever. So, but have intentional, conscious, healthy decision making in your life right now. Think when you go to grab something, just like think before you go to speak, meaning grab something to eat, right? Try to be proactive in your approaches with this stuff. Try to look at even your, not just your physical health in this way, but I think your financial health and emotional health and intellectual health and all these things in the season coming up. And I wouldn't go and start, betting the house on things that don't have a high percentage win right now. I'd be doubling down on what is, safer for you, and try to ride the storm just like you would through a rough season, because we're in a rough season regardless of how you look at it relative to anything. And back to health and nutrition again. If mindset is everything right now, and if you're criticizing other people for being too out there, but you're not practicing good health, intentional health, where you're putting proper nutrients and vitamins into your body, or exercising and movement, where we all know as a society, you can't say that you don't know that these things are the right thing to do, and especially in this time. So out of respect for yourself, out of respect for the businesses that are shut down, just as I'm going to have the same respect of walking into a business, if that business owner wants me to wear a mask or keep whatever distance, high five virtually, right? A high wave. I'm gonna honor that person's framework, and I'm gonna have respect for it. And outside of that, in my own life, I'm gonna get outside and I'm gonna keep my own distance, but I'm gonna get out there, not be hung out in the house, and really focus on the health right now. Allie and I are going to run a 40-day challenge coming up here, kicking off on June 1st. It's a what we call a functional lifestyle challenge, where we're going to focus on nutrition, mindset, breath work, movement, and proper restoration, and knowing how to balance these things out. Because you said it earlier, people are going to be looking to rush back into things. And I think
George just called me right.
Same way with health and fitness, mindset. You need to take a slower approach coming back into this. You may be deconditioned. You're out of your routine, so you've got to get back into that routine. And I see this so much in fitness, and it's why people crash. Almost 30 years in fitness, and I've seen a history of things. And the routine is people get excited and they come back after a drop off, and that's exactly what's going to happen. And people are going to become, they're going to go hard trying to fix their health, but they're actually going to tear their immune systems down from overtraining and going too hard, that they're actually going to get it's going to lead into this second wave, and it goes hand in hand with everything that's happening. So right now, my suggestion is this: start making subtle, slow adjustments in your nutrition. Start adding the proper vitamins into your diet. There are good vitamins and bad vitamins out there, right? Find somebody that's a professional that can help guide you through this if you need it. But start taking measures into your own hands, and don't wait for, reactive measures. Be proactive in all of this.
Well, now is the most of that's a great point, because I got to admit, this whole time I probably have been less active than I would like to be, but it's kind of because of my mindset is that for the most part I'm in my house, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I got to go back to work soon, and so now that with everything opening up, and I'm expected to go back to work, and I'm going to have to be out there next to people, now in my mind is the time, okay, now, like, I'm not saying it's the best way, but now it's time to start like taking your vitamins and eating good and like
Yep.
exercising and keeping your immune system up, because you're not in your safety zone anymore. I got to go back out there in the world and you know, be pretty close to people with what I do for work. And I mean,
Be
I'm
in my, yep.
excited to make money and to, you know, this is the longest I've went without tattooing since I started, by far, 3 times over.
Yeah.
And so I'm excited to get back to exercising my